Is Glorilla gospel? Deitrick Haddon says, absolutely not. Kirk Franklin disagrees, and the answer to that question, whichever side you land on, will tell you everything about where gospel music is headed. You have seen the headlines. Deitrick Haddon confronts Kirk Franklin over secret rituals at BET Awards. Gospel star exposes Kirk Franklin's hit. Deitrick Haddon breaks down after shocking BET revelation. Because both of these names mean something to you. Because gospel music means something. Because when two of the most recognized voices in the black church appear to be in conflict, you want to know what is really happening. So here is what is really happening. There were no rituals. There was no confrontation. There was no hidden agenda exposed. What there was a genuine, important, and long overdue conversation about who gets to be celebrated, about what the word gospel actually means, and about whether the industry that carries that name is still honoring what it was built to carry. That is the real story. And today, we are going to tell all of it. Before we get into the real conflict, let us address the fake one. Because the word rituals, appearing in headlines about Deitrick Haddon and Kirk Franklin, is not journalism. It is not reporting. It is not even commentary. It is a word chosen specifically to make you afraid, to activate something primal and spiritual in a faith audience that takes darkness seriously, to make you click before you think. Here's the truth. Deitrick Haddon never accused Kirk Franklin of rituals. He never claimed there was a secret agenda. He never made the kind of supernatural accusation that those headlines promised you. He did was something far more grounded and far more important. He looked at the 2025 BET Awards gospel category. He looked at who won. He looked at who was being celebrated and who was being overlooked. And he said, out loud, publicly, without apology, this ain't gospel. That is not a ritual accusation. That is an industry critique, a theological argument, a passionate defense of a genre that Deitrick Haddon has given his life to, and it deserves to be taken seriously, not sensationalized into something it never was. Let us take it seriously. Deitrick Haddon was born on February 27, 1973, in Detroit, Michigan. He grew up in a family deeply rooted in gospel music. His father, Bishop Haddon, was a prominent figure in the Church of God in Christ, and from an early age it was clear that music was not just a passion, it was a calling. He began his career as the leader of Voices of Unity, a gospel group that built a devoted following in the late 90s. He later launched a solo career that produced some of the most beloved gospel music of the 2000s and 2010s. His song, Sinner's Prayer, became an anthem for people who felt too broken to be welcomed by the church. His ministry has always been marked by a particular kind of radical grace, a willingness to reach into the spaces that polished religion sometimes refused. He has faced his own very public personal battles, his divorce, his relationships, his personal struggles played out in full view of a gospel community that does not always extend the grace of, and he survived all of it. Not just survived, grew through it. At 52 years old, Deitrick Haddon is a man who has paid his dues in the gospel, who has given decades of his life to a genre he loves, who has watched that genre change, sometimes in ways that feel like growth, and sometimes in ways that feel like... And, at the 2025 BET Awards, he reached a breaking point. Now, before we go any further, we need to talk about Kirk Franklin. Because Kirk Franklin is not the villain of this story. He is not the bad guy. He is not the person Deitrick Haddon is ultimately fighting against. He is, by any honest measure, one of the greatest figures in the history of gospel. Born on January 26, 1970, in Fort Worth, Texas, Kirk Franklin grew up in circumstances that could have broken him entirely. Abandoned by his mother at birth, raised by his great aunt, fighting battles that most people never knew about, while simultaneously becoming one of the most recognized voices in Christian. His albums, Kirk Franklin and the Family, What You Looking For, God's Property, Hero, Losing My Religion, have sold tens of millions of copies. He has won 16 Grammy Awards. He has crossed over into mainstream culture in ways that no gospel artist before him had ever managed. He has collaborated with everyone from Kanye West to Chance the Rapper to, most recently, Glorilla. And that collaboration, that willingness to take gospel music into spaces it had never been before, is exactly where the current controversy. Kirk Franklin believes the gospel should go everywhere, into every room, into every genre, into every conversation. Deitrick Haddon believes the gospel should maintain a standard that protects what it means when it gets there. Both of them love God. Both of them love gospel music. And both of them, from their different positions, are asking the same fundamental question. What is gospel for? The 2025 BET Awards, the Dr. Bobby Jones Best Gospel Inspiration, and the winner, Glorilla, for her song Rain Down on Me, featuring Kirk Franklin, Maverick City Music, and Kira Sheard. Now, let us be clear about what Glorilla is. Glorilla is a rapper from Memphis, Tennessee. She is one of the most successful and most controversial figures in hip-hop right now. Her music is, to put it gently, not typically classified as gospel. Her lyrics, her aesthetic, her public persona are rooted in a world that is about as far from traditional gospel ministry as it is possible to get. Rain Down on Me was a moment of collaboration, a reaching across genres, a song that brought gospel production and gospel artists into a collaboration with a mainstream hip-hop figure. And BET gave it their top gospel award. Gospel community, already navigating years of tension about where the genre's boundaries lie, erupted, and Deitrick Haddon was one of the loudest voices in that eruption. He took to social media and said what many in the gospel world were thinking, but were afraid to say out loud. The gospel industry needs a complete reset. He expressed deep disappointment that the award had been given to someone not in our space. He argued that the genre was being undermined by secular influence. He said he was tired, genuinely tired, of watching the same people celebrated year after year, while dedicated gospel artists who had given everything to the genre were consistently overlooked. He was not just criticizing Glorilla, he was criticizing a system that he believes prioritizes ratings and crossover appeal and mainstream visibility over the authentic, uncompromising proclamation of the gospel. And that critique, however it may have been misrepresented, is a critique worth having. Now, let us talk about the part of Deitrick Haddon's critique that generated the most controversy within the gospel community itself. His reference to seeing the same people celebrated year after year, this was widely understood as a reference to Kirk Franklin, whose consistent Grammy wins, BET collaborations, and industry prominence have made him the most decorated figure in gospel music for 3 decades. And this is where the conversation gets complicated. Because on one hand, Kirk Franklin's dominance in the gospel industry is a genuine phenomenon. He has won more Grammy Awards in the gospel category than arguably any other artist. He has shaped the sound and the direction of contemporary gospel music for 30 years. Is it fair to ask whether that level of dominance leaves room for other voices? That is a legitimate industry question. On the other hand, Kirk Franklin did not manufacture success. He earned it through decades of extraordinary work, music that has genuinely changed lives and brought people to faith who would never have found their way there through traditional gospel channels. Deitrick Haddon later clarified, and this is important, that he was not attacking Kirk Franklin personally. He was attacking the system that makes decisions about what gets celebrated and what gets ignored. The system that determines whose collaboration with a mainstream artist is celebrated as gospel outreach and whose dedication to the genre is dismissed as irrelevant. That distinction matters, and it got lost in the noise of the... When Kirk Franklin was asked about Deitrick Haddon's comments, he was sitting across from Charlemagne the God on The Breakfast Club, one of the most listened-to radio programs in America. A platform where artists come to be heard, and sometimes to be challenged. And Kirk Franklin chose something that not everyone in his position would have chosen. The high route. He did not clap back. He did not defend himself with a list of his accomplishments. He did not call out Deitrick Haddon by name, or dissect his critique or engage in the kind of public back and forth that would have generated 1,000 more clickbait headlines. He said, simply, it is what it is. God bless him, and God bless them. 5 words. Rooted in grace. Completely consistent with everything Kirk Franklin has ever said he... Now, you can take that response in different... People saw it as the ultimate high road. A man secure enough in his calling and his legacy that he does not need to defend himself against every critique. Some people saw it as a deflection, a way of ending a conversation that deserved more engagement. But here is what cannot be denied. Kirk Franklin had the platform, the audience, and the opportunity to escalate this conflict into a full public confrontation. He chose not to. And in a gospel community that is already navigating enough division, that choice matters. Let us step back from the personalities front. Because underneath the BET Awards controversy and the social media posts and the Breakfast Club interview, there is a question that the gospel community has been wrestling with for decades. What is gospel music? There are 2 answers, and both of them have deep theological and cultural roots. Answer number 1, gospel music is a declaration. It is the proclamation of a specific message to a specific community of faith. It has a standard. It has a language. It has a sound and a theology that separates it from everything else. And when those boundaries are blurred, when the declaration becomes diluted, the message loses its power. This is Deitrick Haddon's position. The gospel is not everything. Gospel is something specific. And when we give the gospel label to things that are not gospel, we cheapen the label and confuse the message. Number 2, gospel music is a bridge. It is the carrying of a message into every space that needs to hear it. Into hip-hop, into R&B, into mainstream pop culture, into the rooms where the people who need the gospel most are already gathered. This is Kirk Franklin's position. The gospel does not stay inside the church walls. It goes where the people are, And if Glorilla's audience hears rain down on me and something shifts in their spirit, then the gospel did exactly what it was supposed to do. Both of these positions are theologically defensible. Both of them are rooted in a genuine love for God and a genuine desire to see the gospel impact the world. And the tension between them is not new. It is as old as the church itself. Paul argued with Peter about where the gospel should go and what standards it should maintain when it got there. Deitrick Haddon and Kirk Franklin are having that same argument, just with better production values and a BET award stage in the middle of it. Here is what the gospel community actually needs. Not more clickbait, not more ritual accusations, not more manufactured drama designed to drive views at the expense of real people's reputations. What it needs is exactly what Deitrick Haddon called for, even if his call got lost in the noise. A complete reset. Not of the artists, not of the personalities, but of the conversation. A reset that asks, honestly, without agenda, what does it mean to be gospel in 2026? What standards should the industry uphold? Who gets to decide what is gospel and what is not? How do we celebrate crossover success without losing the theological integrity that makes the gospel the gospel? These are not easy questions. They do not have clean answers. And they certainly cannot be settled by a BET Awards ceremony or a Breakfast Club interview. But they are the right question. And the fact that Deitrick Haddon was willing to ask them publicly at personal and professional cost deserves more respect than the clickbait machine gave him. And the fact that Kirk Franklin was willing to respond with grace rather than retaliation deserves more acknowledgement than a 5-second clip on social media. These are two men who love gospel, who have given their lives to it, who disagree genuinely and importantly about where it should go. That disagreement is not a scandal, it is a conversation. And the gospel community needs to be brave enough to have it. So the next time you see a headline about Deitrick Haddon confronting Kirk Franklin over rituals at the BET Awards, stop, because Deitrick Haddon never talked about rituals. He talked about a genre he loves being handed to someone who has not given their life to it. He talked about dedicated gospel artists being overlooked while mainstream collaborations get the He talked about a system that he believes is failing the music to celebrate. And Kirk Franklin, rather than fighting, chose. Both of those things are real. Both of those things are worth talking about. Both of those things matter far more than any manufactured scandal ever could. The gospel community is having a conversation about its own soul, about what it stands for, about who it celebrates, about where it is going, and whether the road it is on is still the road it was called to walk. That conversation is uncomfortable. It is necessary. It deserves to be heard, clearly, honestly, and without the distortion of clickbait in the way. Deitrick Haddon said the gospel needs a complete reset. Maybe what it actually needs is a complete conversation. And maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of one.